Hello, thanks for coming to Spread the Word, Impress the Press, which is a panel about promoting your game. My name is Denby, I'm the editor of geekjack.com, and by night I'm also working on a game called Richard and Alice. And I have three esteemed panellists with me who I suppose I shall let introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm James Dearden. If you don't know me yet, where have you been all weekend? I make games sometimes, and recently I've actually started selling one, finally. I hope to repeat this process.
I'm Dave Gilbert. I've just spent the last hour over there. I run a company called Watch Die. I do indie point-and-click adventures full-time, developing and publishing them.
I'm Alex Warren. I'm the creator of the Quest text adventure engine, and I've just started publishing a couple of games that people have written using that as apps for iOS and Android.
Cool, and I guess to start with, we'll start with a nice, easy question to each of you individually, I suppose. How important to you is PR and marketing? I suppose we'll start with James again.
Ladies first. For me, PR and marketing happened completely accidentally with the games I released. When I started out, I had no website of my own, no file hosting space, so I was on a website called GameJolt. And that led to an awful lot of people who were already members discovering these games and picking it up. And from there on, any publicity I've had, any PR has sort of mostly been a result of snowballing from there and people noticing the things on there. And for me, PR has kind of been an unconscious process thus far, though it would probably really help to guide it in the future.
Well, like did a lot on my own, mostly through word of mouth when I first started. You probably all heard me talk about this not too long ago, but I did a lot of sending my stuff to the press. Eventually I took it as far as word of mouth could take it, and I needed to start doing some on my own, and I started pushing it to press, keeping lists of who I sent it to and what their responses were, had they reviewed it yet, have they emailed me back yet. It was a lot of work. I didn't like it, I wasn't terribly good at it, and in the end I finally hired someone to just do it all for me. So.
Yeah, PR and marketing is not something that occurs naturally to me because I'm kind of first and foremost a software developer, and anything that involves actually interacting and talking with other people is something that scares me slightly. So PR and marketing is kind of difficult. I guess I've been kind of relying a lot on kind of word of mouth and just kind of hoping that kind of communities kind of spring up and then they'll kind of just share, announcements about games among themselves. I've dabbled in, sending out the odd press release and stuff like that when I've released games onto the App Store. It kind of sank without trace, basically. I haven't really yet summoned up the energy to actually kind of go full on and do PR stuff properly. And I guess I probably should, but I don't like it, and I'm not going to.
It's interesting as well because I think we all come from quite different backgrounds, even sort of working within vaguely the same field. So I mean, James, you kind of have so far worked on free games. So how do you think the approach has to differ depending on whether you're making a commercial game or a freeware game?
With freeware, you certainly have to, I think you have to target it a lot more for who is actually going to buy it. Free games, you're probably a lot more likely for people to just download it on a whim because they see something they might like. They're not going to be put off by, oh yeah, but that's £5. And if it's free, they're more likely to just snap it up there and then, which is fortunately how GameJolt works. They won't let you charge for games.
And obviously you sort of made a few free games and then went on to making commercial games. So how did your approach change at that point, if at all?
At first it really didn't. As you might have heard me say before, I didn't think too much about it at first. I just sort of wanted to get the games out and prayed it would work out, and of course that didn't happen. I wouldn't say my approach changed. The problem I had, since it was there were commercial games and my living was kind of attached to it, I would always have to decide whether I wanted to spend time on the marketing and PR end of things or working on my game. So that's why it took so long for my second game to come out, is because every day I think, okay, do I want to do sales and marketing? Do I want to do business stuff? Or can I work on my game? And it was very hard for me to divide my time. So that took a lot of adjustment, and in the end, that's what led to me just asking other people to do it on my behalf, because I felt my time was better served working on the games than dealing with folks like you.
The couple of games that I've put into the App Store so far have both been free, because I'm trying to kind of build up an audience and a demand for text-based games. But I think in terms of like how the differences in what you do between PR for a free game versus a game that you're selling, probably there shouldn't really be any. I mean, because if you're giving a game away for free, there's presumably you've probably got some ulterior motive to that, rather than you're not just putting it out there just for purely altruistic reasons because you think humanity deserves this to be available. You are putting it out there because you want to draw attention to it, because maybe your business model isn't just selling the game directly, but you want to kind of build up something so that you can then charge for stuff later on. So I think for me, I probably there probably wouldn't be a difference in approach if I was trying to sell like a text game for iOS. However, there probably would be in reality a difference, because if I was trying to sell it and I had earned maybe like £2 in total for the whole thing, then I would probably be shamed into doing more of the necessary PR. Whereas if it's a free game and you've had a couple of thousand downloads or whatever, you think, well, it's free, I'm not gonna. Maybe you'll kind of think, because it's kind of more of a long-term thing, there's less of that short-term pressure, I suppose, to really kind of plug it. But that doesn't mean that, I shouldn't be kind of plugging the free stuff.
And I think it's kind of interesting, because I think obviously everyone sort of formulates a PR plan, even if it is just a very, very basic one. And as with everything in the field of games, and probably anything in the world, it never works. So I suppose, again, all of you in turn, what are some of the main hurdles that you found you've had to overcome when promoting one of your games, and how have you managed to do that? I guess I'll pass it this way this time.
The hurdle was that I made old school point-and-click adventure games. Hurdle number one. It was very hard, and when I first started, there wasn't much of an indie scene. It fortunately started getting much stronger later. I guess it was just being taken seriously was very hard, and just sort of getting people to respond to my emails, and just like you were talking about, trying to, when you first start, your main goal is to get an audience, get people playing it. And one thing I noticed, that when I was doing all that marketing PR after my first game, while still trying to get my second game made, during that time, it looked like the sales weren't that high. I'd get like 20 here, 30 there, 10 here, whatever. And it just didn't look like a lot at the time. But when I released my second game, all of those people who had like slowly bought it over the year, they all bought the next game all at once. So suddenly I had this big, huge number for my next game. So that's when I realized, hey, like the PR does pay off eventually. It just might not seem like it does. It's just a very, very slow process.
Yeah, I think I would echo that point, really. I mean, I think, as I say, because my strengths, I feel, of being a software developer, I'm quite used to, if something doesn't work, I can go in and change some code, and then it does work, and that's problem solved, and we'll move on. Whereas PR is just so kind of fuzzy, and like you were saying, you can't really know what the effect of anything that you're doing is until, maybe weeks later, maybe months or years later, or maybe you'll just never know at all, because you can never do the kind of scientific test where you set up an exactly identical universe and don't do the PR and see what the difference is. And I think this is kind of my trouble, because then I find that really disheartening, actually, because I just have a short attention span, I suppose, really. I want to just do something. Does it work? Yes, excellent, move on. Does it not work? Right, well, I'll keep on working on that, and then it bloody well will work, and then that's it. And then that's kind of problem solved, struck off the list, right, what's next? Oh, it's time to go to the pub, excellent. Whereas you just can't do that when you're kind of promoting yourself. There's always at the back of your mind a kind of a doubt that you could be doing more, but also that kind of worry, well, if I do more, what difference is it going to make? Nobody cares anyway. It can just get you quite depressive, I suppose. Like, nothing I do can make any difference.
It can get very, very discouraging, because when I first released, even before Blackwell, I released a game called Shiva, I was invited to speak at this demo event in New New York City, and I thought it was a big, huge deal, and I went and I practiced my presentation for like 3 days. Obviously, I don't do that anymore. But I was like, I had it down like every time, every joke, everything, whatever. And I went to this thing, and the room was packed, and I had my presentation. I'm like, all right, I did it. I'm going to wake up to like 1,000 sales tomorrow. No, it did not happen. And it is very discouraging, because when you don't see the results right away, it can be a big bummer.
I think part of the problem is humans are unpredictable, and with PR and advertising, I've got the Socratic perspective of all I know is I know nothing. And as I said, you can't just set up experiments with huge amounts of people. A lot of it's a matter of seeing what happens when you get there. When I first released Techno Babylon, I was surprised. After a few weeks, it had over 1,000 downloads, whereas my previous few games had about 200 combined, and I had no idea what was different in this case. It's all a complete mystery. People are weird.
It's a good game. That's what you did.
I believe I may have reviewed it for PC Gamer as well, which may have had something to do with it. It's generally helps. I think, again, it's interesting, you kind of make free games, and there is always an extent to which you can only do the PR thing, and you can't really do the marketing thing, as in PR is marketing to the press, who will tell people about it. Marketing is kind of direct to your audience. How much do you, Dave, kind of put into marketing, and how much into PR, whether that's a budgetary thing or a time thing or whatever?
Well, the marketing and PR are kind of two different things, I guess. A lot of PR is just following up with, like the big part of what I used to do is that, like I said before, keeping the lists and following up with all the press and all of that. And the big issue when you hire someone to do that is to make sure they're on the same level as you are. When I was looking to hire someone, this guy was recommended to me. I forget his name. He was this big, big talker, wheeler dealer type. He knew all these people, people from I don't know, all these nerd things that I wasn't too familiar with. But he was he seemed to be the type of person I wanted, and he was awful. He came up with this one kind of sale idea. He kept calling Blackwell Blackwood, and I finally got rid of him. And I later, I wish I was kidding. But later on, I hooked up with Emily Morganti, who used to do PR for Telltale. So how could that be any more perfect? Like, she knew adventure games, she was familiar with my stuff, she wrote for adventure gamers, she knew the audience, all of her press contacts were people who wrote about adventure games. So when you're going to hire someone to do it, you can't just hire a PR person and be done with it. You got to make sure they're right for you. Did I answer your question at all? I kind of got a little sidetracked. What was the question again?
The sort of how you prioritize PR versus marketing when you're making a commercial game.
Oh, well, I guess with me, Emily does all that, the hardcore PR stuff, like talking to the press and things. But lately, it seems that most of my marketing comes from just doing social media, like Twitter and Facebook and all the blogs and forums and everything. I have never seen a better way to get have direct contact with the fans or like potential customers or players or whatever. It's just been awesome. Of course, it's sometimes I'm a little too available, and I have to answer like 100 emails before noon, and like I'm answering Twitter messages for a long time, and it can get a little overwhelming. But I found that to be like the biggest. People say, "Wow, you really hyped up this game." I'm like, all I do is tweet about it. But it seems to be doing the trick now. I'm sure more things are going to happen later. There's just so much social marketing out there. I mean, now there's like Pinterest and all these other things. I don't even know how Tumblr works or Reddit. That site baffles me. I don't know how anyone navigates it. So there's more that I could do, but lately it's like just going on Twitter or social sites and talking about my stuff does a lot of the legwork for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, direct contact with the audience has always been more powerful than any attempt to kind of go through the press or anything like that. Because it's very rare. I mean, I've had a couple of sites write up articles maybe about the Quest engine and kind of what's happening around there. But generally, most of the traffic is, because I do fairly well just on SEO actually, because the domain name I've got is textadventures.co.uk. So if you're, I could plug there. But if you're googling for text adventures, you will find my website. It's at the top of the list. So I think I'm just reaching a lot of people directly that way, or at least people that know they're looking for text adventures, I suppose, is the thing. But there's other ways of reaching people directly as well. I mean, you can stick a blog post up and then submit that to like Reddit and Hacker News and stuff like that. You've got a lot of options to reach people directly without kind of going through kind of press intermediaries, I suppose. I think the only thing that I really miss about not really having much of a press connection is that I would just like to reach people that don't know that they're looking for text adventure games. I mean, I do quite well with people that do know that that's what they want, but I'm sure there's loads of people out there who just wouldn't even think of looking up that kind of game in the first place, and then how do you actually reach that audience?
As part of my running theme of doing things the objectively wrong way when I make games, every game I've made so far, I've put almost zero thought into marketing and PR full stop, and of course it's been counterproductive. And I should learn from my mistakes, obvious word being should. But I think I've got a paranoid fear of doing things objectively wrong when it comes to marketing as well. I did make a couple of forum posts about my most recent game online, several of which ended up being banned, and ended up getting banned from several forums about it. But I think
Sorry.
probably more to do with the subject matter of the games rather than the post itself and the reaction it generated. I think paranoia is contributing to my lack of it.
Cool, we've just been given the 5-minute warning, so I guess this is a good time to throw it over to questions from you guys. I can't really see anyone very well because I have a really bright light shining in my eye, but I will do my best to kind of pick people out. Yes, at the back.
Yeah, I was wondering how much you're thinking about brand versus product in terms of getting the word out. I mean, certainly Wajidai is something that now carries at least some cachet, and all the big name developing houses have that. But on the other hand, maybe that's a waste of effort if you haven't got your first couple of projects in the limelight. What do you guys think about that?
Well, what's interesting, and I think I spoke about this yesterday, is that after you release a number of games, you start to really notice what your audience responds to. And I noticed that the games that are more comedy or cartoony tend to not get a very strong or good response compared to the more like urban, gritty, like noirish type games. Those are really very popular with the audience that I seem to have generated, versus the comedy ones just don't do as well. Like, they just don't. So I generally tend to focus things more in that direction. You learn what your audience likes, and if you're running a business, you kind of have to, focus towards that. But also, what the audience likes is what I like, so that's also worked out well. I mean, go figure that I made the kind of game I liked, and people, the audience responds to that. So, did that answer the question? I'm really horrible at this answering questions thing. Anyone else?
I think for me, the kind of the brand that I'm trying to build up is actually just myself. Actually, I'd rather people just knew me as like, oh, that's the text adventure guy, and so that I would be the one that people kind of come to if they've got ideas and stuff to do with anything in that area. I think for me, like Quest as a brand name for the engine is probably fine, but it's not particularly searchable for one thing. It's quite a generic kind of word. So I think it's really just about people rather than just kind of abstract names for things. I think that's the important bit of any kind of branding, really.
I get what the question is, but we're running out of time. So.
I think the branding is something I have to catch up with later on, but for now I'm more focused on people noticing the games, and the brand will come secondarily from that, because after all, the name I'm publishing under is my political views, so the more people I can get to vote for that, the better.
I think for me, I was perhaps foolish and maybe a bit arrogant in that I thought, I'm a games journalist, people kind of know who I am on the internet, so when I make a game, people will immediately care. And actually that's not true at all, because no one knows me as a game developer, people know me as a journalist, and for all they know, my game is shit. You thought my game was shit?
I thought the same thing about freeware, because I made several freeware games and people responded really well to them, and I thought well, hey, I've got like 10,000 people downloaded this game. Like, with that, how many sales does that equal out to if I was selling a game? It would be like, not many. So if you're a really popular freeware developer, that doesn't necessarily translate to being a popular commercial developer. It's a whole new set of hoops you have to jump through, and it's like starting from scratch. So I know you.
Should you necessarily think up a different name or identity then?
What, like Wadgen Eye?
Well, I mean, but if you publish loads of freeware, if you've made a name for yourself in freeware games, would it actually be, if you're going to take so little of that with you anyway, would it actually be more conducive to just say, I'm now,
You have to come up with some kind of company name. I didn't have a company name when I did freeware. It was just Dave Gilbert. So when I wanted to sell the games, I needed to come up with a name. And if I had known I was going to be doing this 6 years later, I probably wouldn't have chosen the name Wajidai. But I mean, it really depends. I mean, if you make your reputation on a certain kind of game, and then you decide to go commercial, and then you do a different type of game, don't be surprised if people don't respond well. Or if you make your reputation on being who you are, why reinvent yourself if it works? It really depends on who you are and what kind of games you do or want to do.
Random question. What is a widget?
Okay. When I was young, I loved Egyptian myths, and the Wajidai is the Eye of Horus, and I thought it was just a really neat image. And I thought that if I ever needed a logo, I'd use the Wajidai. And then I couldn't come up with a name for the company. I just couldn't think of anything, and I was like, all right, I want to sell this game. I gotta come up with something. So I'm like, well, I know the logo is going to be the Wajidai, so I'm just calling it Wajidai. Done. So that's the story.
Cool. Do you have time for another?
I think probably
Finish now? Okay, if anyone does have any more questions, then feel free to come over and have a chat later on or something. Thank you very much to everyone, and thanks to Callum for